Welcome home to St. Anne's. We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our
fun
sermons.
gospel.
We can't wait.
This is one of those gospels where no matter where you stand on anything, I'm going to offend you. So just realize it's across the board. We all need to be offended. If the gospel doesn't offend you, you're not paying attention. If God makes you feel cuddly and comfortable all the time and validated, you're not paying attention. So we should all, in fact, I'm going to quote my dad. So my dad was one of the coolest people of all time, I strongly believe. But he was a politician. And when I was growing up, he said, Maggie, because that's, he said, if everybody agrees with you all the time, you're not leading. If everybody is mad at you all the time, you're not leading. And I feel like that really says the gospel in a nutshell. The gospel should both comfort and confound us. So if you feel comfortable all the time and you feel like you're one of the good ones all the time, you're not reading it closely enough. If you feel awful all the time and wretched all the time, also you're not reading it correctly, or you're going to the wrong church. Just being honest. But anyway, let's talk about the gospel today, because I feel like it's one of those gospels that should leave us feeling a little bit like, but also, okay. So let's start with how the story starts, because I think that's really important. Many of us are used to the story of the Good Samaritan, right? We're raised up on this story. It's one of those stories we hear so much that it's also almost it's lost its bite a little bit, I think. But anyway, I want to talk about where the story starts. So the story starts with one of the lawyers, and I'm going to offend every lawyer in the room, but it's fine. This isn't lawyers like today, okay? This is lawyers, so the lawyers at that time know the law very well. That's their job, is to know and No, not that law. The biblical law. They're supposed to know the law at the time, all right? So their job is to pull together, because they don't believe in separation of church and state. Okay? Anyway, not the point. No comment. They're not supposed to believe in the separation of church and state. So their job is to pull all of this stuff together, okay, and make it so we're actually living it. And so would you believe that it's a lawyer who's like, wait a second, Jesus, let's see if we can find a loophole here, right? And so he's like, and so I love the line because he wants to feel validated, right? He wants to feel like what he is doing and the way he's living is righteous, that he is correct in what he's doing. Because I'm just going to guess, because I'm guessing he is much like many of us, and we struggle with who our neighbor is. Okay, so he's like, but, like, who do I have to do that for, right? I mean, like, technically, who is my neighbor? Because if you met some people that you're like, don't want that to be my neighbor. I mean, y'all, there is a reason I moved out of Eagle Creek. Because I do not belong in the suburbs, right? I am not a good subdivision person. I shouldn't have neighbors. Anyway, not the point. My dog also thinks that she shouldn't have neighbors. That's why we're so close, my dog and I. And so we all have this thing, right, where we struggle with being too close to other humans, right? Like, I can deal with humans when they're, like, elsewhere. But when they're, like, in my house living with me, suddenly it's a little bit more difficult, right? And something when you're working with them and they're like in your space all the time, humans get a little bit more difficult to deal with, right? Am I the only one who sometimes struggles to deal with humans? Okay, yeah. I didn't think I was the only one, but if I am, sorry. So the lawyer's trying to figure out a way to make sure that the way he is living is legitimate, is righteous, is good, right? And so he goes to Jesus and he's like, yeah, but like, technically who? So Jesus tells this story, right? Do we need to dig into this story a little bit more? Do I need to tell you about the priest and the Levite and their kind of role? Okay, the priest represents the larger church, like the holiest of the holies. The Levite represents the family system, right? Levites are they're genetically holy, right? So we have representation of the goodest of the goods, right? These are the people that we look up to. The people who genetically are better than us. We live in a culture that believes that, right? That there are people who are just better than us, right? They deserve to be up there because they were born to it. That's the Levites. We have the priest people who, well, they're better than us because they are committed to it and they represent the church. They're holier than us, right? So we have established that the best of the best are represented in this story. And so we have this story, and it is common knowledge that this road is, they would understand that this road is a very dangerous road. Okay, so in the story, historically speaking, they understand that this is a dangerous road to be traveling when they're going down into this road. Okay. So, I mean, there are certain places that you probably just don't wander around, right? And so they understand that this is a dangerous area that this man is in. What I think is really, really important here is it's not just that they walk by this man. They go out of their way to not see him, to not acknowledge him, to not have their hands sullied by this man's presence, right? How often do you and I go out of our way to not see? Because that's, I feel like, even deeper than sometimes we see, but we don't know what to do, and we panic, and we just freeze, right? We don't know what to do. But then we go another step. When we actively go out of our way to not see things. Because if we don't see it, then we're not responsible for it, right? Right? And so the church is guilty, and we as the church are guilty of going out of our way to not see. Because there's something about if we see what is going on in our community, then we might feel uncomfortable. And if I feel uncomfortable, I should probably do something about it, right? Right? So we have that representation. And then, like I said, we have the representation of the people who are born different, right? So they are separate. So I want you to think about our extreme separation of have and have-nots. Those of us who have, and around the world where they have not. How often are we really good about not seeing what is going on in the rest of the world? We're pretty good at it. We're pretty good at it. And we justify things. Well, it's not that I was born this way. I worked for this. I worked for this. Did I? I mean, yeah, I did. I would like to say to you that I worked really, really hard. I went to college. I went to grad school. I went to grad school again. I could just collect graduate degrees, I guess. I have nothing else to do with my life. So there is a piece that all of us are hard workers, right? I am not questioning that any of us are hard workers. But does that claim that other people who are struggling aren't hard workers? The other people in the world who have less than we do are lazy? And that's what we do. That's how we go around on the other side of the street. That's one of our tricks to get to the other side of the street, is we claim something about this person who is struggling. But Jesus' message is, what does it mean to be a neighbor? Because, okay, this is another part of the story, and you probably know this. We don't like the Samaritans. They are them, okay? When you get to the stories in the Bible where you have the Samaritans versus the others, you go, oh, boo the Samaritans. Ever say boo the Samaritans? Boo the Samaritans. You know, it's, what is a Lee Summit version of the Samaritans? Let's see. Oh, you know what? We'll go states, right? Because states always, you know, Iowa doesn't like Missouri. Missouri doesn't like Arkansas. You just keep going down the line, right? I mean, at some point you can't go any further south, right? In Iowa, Minnesota didn't like us either. You know, we said in Iowa, this is kind of it's really not important. Ask me later about our joke about Missouri and Iowa. I'm just going to say, if you move the border of Iowa and Missouri north 20 miles, you'll raise the IQ of both states. Anyway, not really true. Anyway. Okay, so, but we have that, right? So the folks who are reading this story understand that the Samaritan is, we don't like the Samaritans. And that's why Jesus chooses that person, right? So it's, if we're telling a story about Missouri and we're like, but the person from Arkansas stopped, or the person from Illinois stopped, we'd be like, oh, shoot, they stopped. The point of this is to challenge our very core beliefs of what it means to be neighbor, because sometimes it comes naturally, right? Like if you have a really good, like some of my neighbors are really awesome. I love some of my neighbors. And it's really, really easy. And it is easy for me to be a good neighbor to you all, because you want to know what? I like you. But it might be harder to be a good neighbor to somebody who is more different than I am, who might have a different political view than I do, who has a different upbringing than I do, who is, you know, from Arkansas. I mean, when you're from Iowa, Arkansas is really down there. Because you just keep going down the line. And that is our challenge today. Because when we try to justify these things, right? We're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter how we treat those people. I mean, they're not like us. They're not really our neighbors. They're not Christians. They're not Midwesterners. They're not Americans. They're not white people. They're not our culture. They're not our color. They're not our gender. They're not our whatever, right? Then suddenly it's easier to be like, well, I don't have to be a good neighbor to them because they're not really one of us. And that's when Jesus is like, so who, my dear friend lawyer, so who is the neighbor here? And the lawyer's like, dang it, I hate it when that loophole closes. And he's like, well, I guess the one who showed mercy, maybe? Yeah? All right. So, yes. Katie? Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. This is totally gotcha. Yeah. Exactly. So the challenge of this story is, yes, Jesus is the king of the gotcha stories. That's why he speaks in parables so often, right? Because when you and I actually have to do the work of understanding a parable, we have to go deeper. And that's what I love about parables, because it's not surface level. It's not an easy answer, right? They want to just ask Jesus a question, and Jesus answers, and we move on. But Jesus always goes deeper, because the lawyer knows that the priest and the Levite are his neighbors, right? They're bros. They're all part of the same. They all work together, right? So the beauty of this story is every single person in the story is a neighbor. Ooh, that's a good question. What does it mean to be a neighbor? Does it mean advocating and speaking out? Or does it mean living it and hoping that just our living it models the behavior? And I think those are good questions. And to be honest, I think that's something every single person has to figure out for yourself. Because some of us are called to different ways of being, right? But realize that the way that you live your life is the loudest sermon you will ever preach. And I think we all have to decide for ourselves, am I somebody who spreads the Christian message by modeling it? Or am I somebody who really has to speak out and advocate? And that's a strength that I have, and I can do that too. Some of us aren't necessarily good at that. I'll be honest, I'm 5'4", and I'm not the strongest person. In fact, my husband will tell you, he sometimes has to tell me to shut up because he can't back me up. I mean, yeah. Sometimes it's a safety thing, you know? But I think that is a valid question when it comes to ministry. What are you called to? Are you called to a modeling ministry, or are you called to an advocating ministry? And maybe you're called to different things in different times. And I think that's a very good question. And I don't know the answer. Sometimes I feel like my ministry is a modeling ministry, and sometimes I feel like I am called to speak out and to advocate. And it just depends on those situations and what we are capable of. But what I love about this story is that after this whole thing, after this whole story, Jesus still shows love for this lawyer, right? And so even though it's a gotcha story, it's still a loving story. It's still a caring story. And what does he say at the very, very end? Because that's what I think you and I have to hear every single Sunday. Every single Sunday. Go and do likewise. Maybe I should put that above our door as we leave. But
We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit
running out of
subscribe
things
to
to
receive
paint
our
above the door.
sermons. We can't wait to meet you.
So we only have the one door.